Smart Business Account for SMEs. Being a business owner is a role that changes constantly. At JMMB Bank, we offer a new type of partnership. We understand and care about the unique needs that come with operating a small or medium-sized business by offering flexibility, partnership, and expert advice to support your successful growth. For you, we've created the JMMB Smart Business Account. The JMMB Smart Business Account is an interest-bearing checking account for registered businesses with an annual revenue of under $450 million, or US dollar equivalent, which gives you the opportunity to maximize the value of every dollar earned. The benefits? No nuisance fees. Never have to deal with monthly service fees, account dormancy fees, and minimum monthly balance requirements. Easy payments. Enjoy free bill payment and free inter- and intra-bank automated clearinghouse ACH transfers within Jamaica. Interest accumulation. Earn interest and grow your company's money over time. Interest is calculated daily and paid monthly. One free manager's check per month. Check leaves available upon request, or ask about our special pay-as-you-go check feature. Speak to a JMMB Bank representative today to see how the JMMB Smart Business Account, along with our Small Business Loan Solutions and SME Resource Center, can support you in growing your business. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn at JMMB Group, or visit our website, jm.jmmb.com. JMMB SME Resource Center, a partnership that goes above and beyond. Because you need more than just a bank, we are committed to offering support and guidance to small and medium-sized businesses, or SMEs, every step of the way. The JMMB SME Resource Center ensures that you are prepared to access JMMB's banking, investment, and insurance brokerage services, along with our business planning expertise. The center provides customized advice to take your business to the next level. The JMMB SME Resource Center will help you to identify financial opportunities, develop a professional business plan, structure financial statements, and solve business challenges with the help of our network of business partners. Are you ready to grow your SME with JMMB? Speak to one of our JMMB SME representatives to find out how we can partner with you. Follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at JMMB Group, or visit our website at jm.jmmb.com.
All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another SME Resource Center workshop. My name is Natalia Rahmatullah, and I'm here to host you guys this evening. I hope you all are very ready to hear about how you could protect your net profit against inflation. We have a really interesting session for you guys here tonight. So for those of you who may be new, special welcome to you all. This is part of our monthly workshops. We do monthly workshops within the SME Resource Center. I saw some TT participants here, so welcome to you guys as well. And as you may know, it's customary for us to start our workshops off with a word of prayer. So I'm going to invite Mr. Vincent Auld. He's our Senior SME Resource Center Officer, to lead us. Vincent?
Hi, thank you, Natalia. Good evening, everyone. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks and praise for taking us safely through today. Lord, you are indeed our strength and protector. You lift us up when we are weak, and you fill our hearts with love, joy, and happiness. As we meet virtually this evening, we give you all the glory and praise for all the wonderful things you have bestowed upon us. Lord, we pray that tonight's presentation, How to Protect Your Net Profit Against Inflation, will be beneficial and useful to all of us. This we pray in the mighty name of Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you.
Amen.
Over.
Thanks, Vincent. All right, and next we have a reading from our Vision of Love. And to our new participants, what our Vision of Love is, it's really a guiding document that we use within JMMB that speaks to our core values and our attitude and how we operate with our clients and our team members. So if you're interested, we have it up on our website. You can check it out. It's jm.jmmb.com. And we're just going to invite Ms. Roxanne West. She's our SME admin support to give us a reading this evening. Roxanne?
Good evening, everyone. The JMMB team recognizes diversity, and while celebrating differences among team members, realizes that there are commonalities that bind members together. When this oneness is accepted, nurtured, and developed, this enhances the ongoing implementation of the shared vision. The intention then is to ensure that wherever conflict exists, this leads to a positive outcome. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much, Roxanne. All right, so like I said, this is one of our workshops, one of our monthly workshops we have to our new participants and to our retaining participants, just a friendly reminder. So today we are here to talk about protecting your net profit against inflation. But to our new participants, just to remind you guys of who the SME Resource Center is, what do we do? Our SME Resource Center, we are partners with our SMEs. We journey with you guys through your stages of development. So through partnership, we provide solutions, both financial and non-financial, based on where you're at in your life cycle in order to satisfy all of your needs and make your dreams a reality. So just a quick reminder on what you can expect from us through the Resource Center. Initially, when you come in, you have your needs assessment with us, where we find opportunities for your business. You have access to our business development tools and templates. You have access to our partners in the ecosystem at discounted rates, our calendar of events that gives you different workshops, different trainings, different mixers, much like the workshop that we have at today. You'll also have access to our SME Resource Center community, our WhatsApp chat, our WhatsApp club, our SME directory. You'll have regular monthly check-ins on your business progress, as well as access to all of the JMMB solutions to make those dreams a reality. So today, what we're going to focus on, like I said, we're going to focus on protecting your net profit against inflation. So what we're going to be focusing on is understanding what causes inflation to increase, how inflation actually affects your business performance. And we're going to discuss a few measures that you can take to mitigate the risk of inflation on your business. And to take us through this evening's session, we have Mr. Theodore Mitchell. Mr. Theodore Mitchell, he serves as the Group Sovereign Economist at JMMB. He's had a wealth of experience in the public sector, working with the Ministry of Finance and Planning and Airports Authority of Jamaica. He broadened his expertise in taxation, fiscal management, and debt management, and he formed a part of the ministry team that helped in the production of the Matalon, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Committee Report on Taxation Reform in Jamaica in 2005. In his current role, he focuses on research related to the fiscal affairs of several sovereigns in Latin America and the Caribbean, namely our countries of operation, Jamaica, Dominican Republic, and Trinidad and Tobago. In addition, he incorporates in the Caribbean. As an experienced research analyst with in-depth understanding of the behavior of corporates and sovereigns in the business cycle and interest rates, he's able to share insights on how assets are expected to perform in this new interest rate paradigm. He's highly qualified, holds a Master's of Science in Economics from UIMONA and a certificate in Taxation Policy from Duke University, and is also a proud Kingston College alum. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Mr. Mitchell to take us through this evening's session. Theodore, you're muted still, right?
Sorry about that. All right, pleasant evening to you, gentle folks. Thanks for having me amongst you. When I heard that, from my colleague Natalia, I thought, it was my funeral, and I was just laying there. I heard her speak the eulogy. All right, but as it is that we're not at a funeral today, all right, we're here at one of our monthly session. I hope to keep you engaged, and you would leave here with a lot of knowledge. All right, so without further ado, let us get into the meat of the matter. All right. So my screen is being shared with you.
No, we're not seeing it yet. You may have to reshare.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, so there we go. All right, you there now? Seeing it?
Yep, we are.
All right, good. All right, so I'm just going to take you. It's somewhat of a lecture of sort in terms of looking at what is inflation, what are the causes of inflation, and can the government control inflation? Can we limit the impact of inflation on us as individuals? And we look at the effect of inflation on companies' account, more so the income statement and the balance sheet, and then we'll look at measures that businesses can implement to mitigate the risk of inflation on their activities. And of course, it is that we will conclude, because we all have to leave here at some point in time. Now, what is inflation? Good. Now, before I even look at it, so what is inflation? Inflation is simply, general increase in prices, all right? And general price level. Now, recall it is that when you're looking at inflation, you're looking at, goods generally in an economy, all right? So it is that it's not just looking at market goods, but you're looking at the price of cars, etc. All right? Now, the increase in inflation naturally signal a decrease in purchasing power. Now, if it is that you have, let's say it is that, all of us, or most of us work, or it is that we own businesses, etc. If it is that your income is being generated out of profit or, a regular salary, if you're, just using a number, say 5,000 US dollars, across the board, Trinidad, Jamaica, and that inflation is running at 10%, it means that $5,000 which you have at the start of the year cannot purchase $5,000 goods and services at the end of the year, because it is that price levels have gone up, as a result of inflation. Now, inflation is not new. It's sad. You hear a lot of persons speaking about inflation now and so on because of what is happening globally, right? And I will look at some slide and show you what is happening. But the truth is that inflation has always been amongst us, and it is here to stay. And we'll get into the meat of the matter in a few slides. But, two most commonly used inflation indices are the consumer price index, which a lot of us are familiar with, because that is often the one which we hear on the radio or television, right? And essentially what the CPI is, as I noted, in Trinidad, you have the Central Statistics Office in Jamaica. You have the Statin, and essentially they do research and look at the average consumer, what they consume. Then it is that they derive what is called a basket. I'll just show you an example here. A basket, a weighted basket. This is the CPI for Jamaica, right? A weighted basket in terms of the prices and of goods and services that individuals utilize. And then throughout the month, they will track how it is that those prices move, and it is that they come up with, the CPI index and the movements, right? Now, the truth is that inflation, as is in terms of represented in the basket, may not be fully representative of the business inflation, right? Because the inflation, the CPI, which you're seeing, represent the impact of price change on the average individual. Okay, look, for example, at the Jamaica situation, where it is that food and alcohol, non-alcoholic beverage account for 35% of the basket, transportation 11%, housing, water, electricity 17%. For a business, it may very well be different because it is that you're not spending so much on food and so on. So with that, I will encourage you as small businesses to track your spending. And this is an important component, right? To track your spending in terms of what you spend on, etc., because that will form an important component in terms of how you will address dealing with inflation. In a few slides, we will get into the meat of the matter. Good. Now, inflation essentially is caused by two things. There are two means of inflation: demand pull inflation, and cost push inflation. Now, demand essentially has a lot to do with the general working of the economy and the central bank increasing money supply. And that is not a bad thing, because what it is signaling is that aggregate demand is actually increasing. And for businesses respond to consumers, and those consumers drive your activities. So in the course of business, the demand for your goods and services, you may not be able to meet the needs of consumers instantaneously in terms of the additional increase. So what you will do is to increase prices, and that forms that demand pull inflation. So it's not a bad thing in and of itself, right? Because it's signaling the natural process of the economy in terms of improvement in wages and salaries, as well as people ascertaining loans to purchase goods and services which redound favorable to you and your activities. Now, the other component of inflation, which we have seen in recent time, is the cost push inflation. Now, if a lot of us may go back to 2020, where it is that COVID pandemic came about, China, which is a major global supplier, essentially, there was the lockdown, and as a result of that, there are a number of physical goods could not be channeled to various parts of the globe. So what you have was a situation where it is that there was restriction in supply, and that essentially led to significant rise in terms of prices. Now, add to that, you had a situation in 2022, March, the war in Ukraine and Russia, Ukraine being a major producer of fertilizer and wheat, the prices of those commodities increased significantly, and that had a significant impact in terms of inflationary pressure throughout the world, and here in the Caribbean, Jamaica and the Trinidad is no exception to that sort of inflation, which we have seen recently. Now, before I get there, I'd like to ask you a question, all right? And I'd like the audience to lock in. This is like Jeopardy. If it is that I was to give you $1 million, TT or Jamaican dollars, say it is that 20 years ago, right? And you want me to increase that over time, would you prefer me to index it to inflation, or would you prefer me to index it to the FX rate? I need at least 5% to respond no. All right, lock in your answers. Let me see them in the comment box. Would you prefer me to index it to inflation or index it to the FX rate? 5%.
That question. So we have 2 persons in the chat saying FX rate, 2 more saying FX rate, 1 saying inflation.
Okay, so we have 5 persons. So there are so 5 persons. Okay, all right. So let's look at some graphs. Now Jamaica. Okay. Now here we look at $1,000 in 2022, and we're indexing that $1,000 to inflation as well as the FX rate. Now what we see is that through the course 2002 to 2022, that would have grown by 5 folds, a multiple of 5 times. Whereby if it is that it was indexed to the FX, it would only grow by about 3 times. Right? Now, before I even so let's look at Trinidad and Tobago. Right? For Trinidad and Tobago, on the inflation side, it would have grown by 2.7 times over the course of the period, while on the FX side, it would have grown marginally. Good. Now, it's very important for me to highlight to you what is happening here. Now, Jamaica, for the most part, the Bank of Jamaica, essentially, prior to 2019, it focuses on looking at and controlling the FX, right? There was but Jamaica maintains a relatively open economy in terms of the movements of FX. So without that constraint, yes, the Bank of Jamaica would intervene from time to time, but you still had that depreciation of the currency. That said, to the extent that the country is open, purchase a lot of goods and services from overseas, which it cannot control those prices, good, the impact of inflation is significant. So you're seeing where it is that on the FX side, the bank has done a relatively decent job in terms of containing FX movement, but on the inflationary side, it has not done such a great job, right? So you see where it is that inflation has exceeded the movement in the FX, right? For Trinidad, it's a wholly different thing in that the authority holds the currency as being sacrosanct. So it is that most persons would say from they were a boy, from the eyes were at their knees, the currency was relatively stable, except for about 2019, I think you had a 5% depreciation, but for the most part, it has been relatively stable. So the currency movement, is relatively static over that 21-year period, where it is that on the inflation side, because it is that Trinidad has to purchase goods and services overseas, they, like Jamaica, are a price taker. So it is that prices do increase. But what you observe is that because the currency is relatively stable, rather than it increasing by 5 folds, it only adjusts by 2.7 folds. Okay. Now, so what this is indicating to us is that inflation is nothing new to either territory, right? Good. And here it is for Jamaica. I look at inflation for the period 2002 to 2018, essentially, prior to then, the BOJ didn't control inflation, as in it wasn't in their mandate to control inflation, so to speak. It was secondary. And if we apply that 4 to 6% band, you see for the most part, inflation was way over that 4 to 6% band, right? Good for more from 2002 to 2018. So what that highlights is that Jamaica is not, inflation is not something new to Jamaica, neither Trinidad and Tobago. What you see happening is, you look at first world countries, because they have no face that supply shock. You look at the graph for 2020, you see that steep rise in inflation for US, Canada, and the UK. right? Good. You see, their inflation, US for the most part, has an inflation target of around 2%. Same for the UK and Canada to some extent, right? And for the most part, their central banks have managed to keep inflation relatively low. But then came 2020. Where it is that you had that cost push inflation, where it is that they couldn't control for the most part. Plus, on places like the United States, where it is that the central government had given persons a lot of resources during the COVID lockdown. So when it is that there was this easing of COVID, that money, persons, was that pent-up demand. So the pent-up demand, so the demand pull inflation, coupled with, the supply challenges, has led to significant rise in inflation. Good. So, the key takeaway is that inflation has always been a part of this business cycle or the business operation in the global space as well as the Caribbean. But what we do not like is high and erratic inflation. Good, because it is that it limits our ability to plan, right? Because it is that when you're unable to determine whether or not it is that inflation is going to be 3% or 5%, what it does is that it forces you to think short term rather than long term, and it derails the business process and essentially could lead to lower economic growth over time. Now, looking at price levels, the Bloomberg Commodity Price Index, which tracks commodity prices to the extent that, as I say, a lot of Caribbean countries are price takers. What it is that I was looking at Bloomberg Index over a 5-year period. You see, at the start of 2020, it's increased significantly, and it is down now. What that is pointing to, in terms of, if you notice, it is tracking down in recent times, is that the inflation impulse from commodity prices is trending down. You're seeing inflation on the down in places like Jamaica, and it's coming down for the larger developed economies, the US, UK, and so on to an extent, right? In Trinidad and Tobago, inflation is relatively high for now because it takes a relatively longer time before it is that a lot of businesses started to pass through the impact of commodity prices on the general price level, right? So you're seeing where it is that at the end of December, inflation was 8.7% for Trinidad, and our internal projection is showing that by about the end of the year, inflation should fall to about 5%, potentially 4.5%. Good. So as I pointed out, change in global prices, commodities, that pass-through impact does have an impact in terms of inflation, and that is something that a lot of us, we can't control because is that we're price takers in that regard. Now, can governments control inflation? Right? To some extent, yes, and to another extent, no. And I did point it out to you just now in terms of countries like Jamaica, Trinidad are net importers for global goods. Now, the Bank of Jamaica mandate is to control inflation, and since 2019, the BOJ has targeted an inflation range of 4 to 6%. Right? For the most part, since 2019, the inflation rate has trended down, good, relative to where it was historic level. In fact, over that period, I think the inflation rate is about 5.7%, which is a 2% differential compared to the historical average. Now, it's not just a matter of I have to give kudos to the central bank for what it has done, but what is observed over that period is that commodity prices have largely declined for the most part. You look at oil prices, it's only in recent times that, in 2020, where you saw commodity prices going up, and then the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where again it spiked. But for the most part, commodity prices, coming out of 2018, 2019, have been relatively subdued, and that has helped to, cauterize inflation in a lot of commodity-dependent economies, right? Now, the central banks utilize monetary policy to help control inflation through, the policy rate, the sale of CDs and cash reserve requirement for banks. The aim of those pretty much is to limit spending in the economy. And, let me explain something to you. Let's take, the banks. Banks operate, the JMMB operate a bank. We operate in a fractional reserve system. So we take customers' money and we loan to you. Good? Now, when it is that the central bank say, hey, we're going to raise the cash reserve requirement, what that does is that limits our ability to lend to you. Good. So when it is that, recall it is that the consuming public not only spend from their income, but also from what they can borrow as well as their savings. So when it is that banks are unable to lend the quantum that they desire, this restrict the demand for goods and services and help to bring inflation down. So you see it in Jamaica now, where it is that the central bank is doing a number of things. They have increased the policy rate, the repo rate, moving from 0.5% to 7%, which is a 6.5 or 650 basis point increase over the space of about 18 months. And what the policy rate essentially is doing is to say, okay, all right, if the BOJ is offering you 6.5% on, or 7% rather on their instruments, a lot of banks will be incentivized to place their funds with the BOJ as opposed to lending, to customers, even though they may be getting at 10%, but there's a certain level of risk there. Recall, there's non-performing loans. So by doing that, right, the Bank of Jamaica is able to limit the money supply and help to cauterize the demand for goods and services in the economy, right? So in the past, the BOJ focused on managing the exchange rate. Now they have been given an exclusive mandate to manage inflation, but nonetheless, they still manage the exchange rate somewhat, because it is that, there's a strong relationship between the exchange rate and inflation. And that the exercise which we did essentially points to that sort of relationship, right? Let me go, right? You see where it is that the two actually tracks somewhat along the same path. They are not equal, but nonetheless, it shows a relatively strong relationship. So in fact, the research finding indicate in the past that for every 1% increase in the exchange rate, there was a 0.5% increase in inflation, right? So with that, the Bank of Jamaica is active in the foreign exchange space, helping to minimize depreciatory pressure because of the potential risk of higher inflation as a result of the exchange rate getting out of hand. It's more or less the same for the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago. While the central bank doesn't have an exclusive mandate to manage inflation, it is within their ambit. And the Central Bank of Trinidad, like the BOJ, influence aggregate demand via those conduits or tools of monetary policy, the repo rate, the cash reserve requirement, as well as the sale of CDs, right? Those have the potential to either increase the money supply if it is that they so desire, right? Or to contract money supply if it is that they so desire. Now, the central bank policy in TNT since COVID has been relatively neutral in terms of what have transpired. The Trinidad is a dual economy of sort, where it is that you have the non-petroleum, and you guys in Trinidad know it better than I do. You have the non-petroleum sector and the petroleum sector. Because of the lockdown, the non-petroleum sector was underperforming. You're coming out of COVID, etc. So the central bank wanting to facilitate growth in that area has not increased the repo rate as opposed to other central banks. So the view there is to facilitate banks like JMMB giving loans so as to help that sector to grow. And indeed, for 2022, you saw it is that there was green shoot because it is that the sector expanded, based on IMF numbers, upwards of about 4% in 2022, which contributed to overall growth in the economy and is likely to do so in 2023. Right? So the takeaway is that Yes and no, the central bank, our central bank is able to influence inflation. One, because, on the no side, recall it is that I spoke to commodity prices being a major component in terms of the imports. So it is that you can't tell the Saudis not to increase oil price, right? So it is that when those prices go up, you have to take them as is, and that does add to the inflation, right? But on the other hand, the central banks have the capacity to curtail demand in the economy, utilizing the tools of money supply, right, at their disposal, so that is able to help keep inflation relatively subdued, right? Let's move on. And here it is that I'm showing where it is that since the Bank of Jamaica has adopted inflation policy, 2019 through to 2021, you see where it is that inflation was meandered within that policy framework. But then because of, COVID increasing global prices have increased beyond the range, but they are coming down and are expected to be within the range by the middle of 2023, thereabout. Now, let's get to the part where we look at inflation and the individual. Good? Now, I mean, I am speaking to the choir, or, preaching to the choir, so to speak, in that we all have felt the impact of inflation on our spending power, right? For those of us who are salaried and do not have other sources of income, to the extent that we negotiate a salary increase at the end of the year, when it is that we're faced with inflation, good, I mean, you have to cut back on your spending. All right. So if it is that I should look at, a ledger, so to speak, in terms of the individual, we have our investment, we have cash. Some of us own real estate. On the liability side, we have bank loans, all right, other liabilities and mortgages. Now, let's look at how it is that inflation affects each of these. Now, first, let me start with real estate. For the most part, real estate tends to maintain its value with the inflation, right? It's a relative inflation edge over the long run. When it is that prices level goes up, real estate values tend to go up as well. Good? Note. Now, cash is the worst performer of all assets, in that if you hold cash, good, once there's inflation, it means the real value, the amount of goods and services that cash is able to purchase will fall. Now, investment, it depends on what it is that you're investing in, because if you're investing in instruments that are able to outstrip inflation in terms of the return, then you'll be net positive in terms of the growth in your investment. If, however, the rate of return is lower than inflation, then the real impact is going to be negative, in that your investment will fall, in that if it is that you should liquidate your investment, the value of goods and services that is able to purchase in an inflationary environment will be lower than, at the start of when it is that you made that investment. Good? On the liability side, naturally, all right, you want, if it is that you have liabilities, bank loans, etc., it's relatively good for you when it is that there is inflation, all things being equal, if it is that there's no adjustment in terms of interest rates on those loans. Because what it means is that if you borrowed, let's say, $1 million at the start of the year, and inflation is 50%, right, then that $1 million is no longer worth $1 million in terms of the goods and services that it can purchase at the end of the year, right? So you want when it is in a case where in an inflationary environment, the value of debts in terms of mortgages, bank loans, etc., they actually fall in real terms. In real term. So the takeaway from it is that, you want on your ledger as an individual, good, to own assets that are able to withstand the assault of investments, okay, of inflation rather, not investment, right? So you want to own real estate, investments that outperform inflation, and, little cash depending on your needs. Good. While on the liabilities side, liabilities actually decline in real terms with inflation. So it is that I would want to owe Natalia, good, as opposed to she owing me in an inflationary environment, because it is that I'd be in a relatively better position. Okay. Right. So the general takeaway is that as individuals, you want to own assets, be it real assets or portfolio assets, that generate returns that are higher than inflation. So it is that you'll be in a better position over time. So that is how you build your wealth. Good. And it's no different for businesses, which we'll get into as well. Now, let's look at the impact of inflation on the business account. And we're looking now at income statement. Okay. So this is a simple abridged income statement. So we have sales, cost of goods sales, gross profit, expenditure, right? Now, inflation, let's say it is that you're selling goods. If it is that you're not able to pass on the prices, good. If you're not able to pass on, then it is that your sales will be curtailed somewhat, all right? So you want to be in a position where you're able to pass on price increase, good. Your expenditure, your rent for the most part will move somewhat with inflation. Your utilities, is a definite. Interest rates, depreciation, relatively static. So on the expenditure side, you're seeing where it is that most of the expenditure items will move with inflation. Good. So all things said and done, if it is that your expenditures are going up with inflation and you're not in a position to move your sales price, good. Well, what it speaks to is lower net profit for you, right? On the other hand, if you're able to adjust your sales price, right, good, and in terms of, you're able to move your sales price with your cost of sales, maintain your gross profit margin, then at the end of the day, you're able to, at a minimum, maintain the same level of profitability or increase your profit. Good. So that is a sticking point that I want you to keep with you now. So it is that in our discussion down the road in terms of how it is that we address inflation, we have, we can bear that in mind. On the balance sheet side, right, we have, assets and we have liabilities. Recall it is that, earlier as an individual, I said that, fixed assets increase over time with inflation. Good. If it is that you own a piece of land, and it's in an assume it is that it's a relatively decent land where it is that you have no polluters beside you or no adverse environmental impact taking place, the price of the land naturally is expected to increase with inflation. Good. Now, on your current account side, cash naturally, as I indicated to you, decrease in real value over time with inflation, right? On the other hand, stocks, your stock price is going to move. If it is that you're purchasing new goods, naturally it is that it's going to be inflationary, right? So it is that the price will go up. On the debtor side, it's the inflation, as I said. You actually want to owe people when it's in an inflationary environment. So persons owing you, it's a good thing for them in an inflationary environment because it's that the real value of what they owe you in period one is not the same as it is in period two, right? So there are some real effects happening in your balance sheet as a result of inflation. Now, on the on the liability side, good, naturally loans, as I recall it is that, I said you want to be a creditor, or rather you want to be a borrower. So it is that the bank loan in terms of its real spending power will decline. Likewise, those people who owe the creditors, good. And the net impact of all this, good, right, will impact your equity. Okay, in terms of if it is that you are positive, net positive in terms of the growth, plant and equipment, etc., right, relative to what is happening in terms of your liabilities, then it is that you would see an increase in equities. right? So the general takeaway is that inflation impacts your income statement and your balance sheet, right? And it is that the effect is going to be dependent a whole lot on whether it is that you're able to influence the price of your sales. Because for the most part, right, you'll be getting increase in prices through the via your expenditure conduit in terms of utilities, interest, and so on. So it is that you now have to create a means by which to control those expenditure. Now, this brings me to the point where it is that we look at measures that we can adopt to counter inflation. And what is that we're looking at now? Measure through the income statement. Recall I spoke to, in terms of on your sales, good? The cost of goods is going up, okay? Now, the first thing maybe for some individuals is to look to increase prices, but then it's highly dependent on the sort of market that you're operating. And we're talking about small businesses, right? Good. So, a lot of you may be operating in the space, so it may be difficult for you to adjust your price instantly. But what it is that you can do is, and I noticed that the business center, stress this to you guys, is that you must have a feel as to what is happening with respect to the type of goods that you're selling and the profit margin on those goods. If it is that you have, some goods where it is, for different purposes, you may be doing promotions, etc. So it is that, those goods, some of the goods may have very low margins. Then, from that perspective, maybe it is that it's best to pull them from the shelf. You know what I'm saying? Good, as opposed to increased prices, right? So that may be a first goal, right? So that is one means. If it is that for whatever you can't, well, that you're doing that, but it may just be inevitable that you may have to increase prices, right? But you don't just look at increased prices the first goal, because it is that you have to assess the market that you're operating in and the type of individuals that you are selling to. Because if it is that they're very responsive to prices, it could actually have a net impact on your business, right? You increase the price, but the demand for your goods actually go down, and so it is that your sales volume go down, or rather the total sales actually decline. The next component you'll have to do, as I said, within that context, is to do your research. And doing your research encompasses you looking at the type of market that you're operating in, the type of customers that you're selling to, and your suppliers, right? You have to do that. So in terms of doing that, once it is that you have a feel as to the consumers that you're selling to, the market you're operating in, right? This will influence to some extent the range with which you can increase prices, to recover, not to recover rather, but rather to maintain your sales level so as to offset the increase in the price, in the cost of sales. With that said, you have to go down to the cost component. In terms of you start now to look at things like transportation, utilities, personnel. How can I cut the fat, right? You have to trim the fat. You have to be lean. Good. Utilities. Am I using AC in areas that do not need to be cooled, right? For my internet bill, do I have an internet service where it is that they're offering me frills that I don't need, right? So you have to trim your expenditure. Good. And in so doing, it will help, to limit the level of price increases on your business. The next component of it is, manage your cash conversion cycle, right? And this cash conversion cycle is a metric that you use to track how it is that, from the point of buying goods, how it is that the cash moves throughout the business and when it returns to you, right? The shorter the cash conversion cycle, the better it is for you, the longer, right? It's not so great, right? Within that framework, you want to manage your receivables. Good, that is people owing you. Recall it is that I spoke to in times of inflation, right? Debt, as in, right, the real value of debt actually decline. So it is that people owing you for extended period in a time when it is that you sell them goods at X amount, the goods now cost Y, right? So when it is that you get your funds, you're not able to buy the same level of the same quantity of goods that you sold them, right? Because it is that price has moved significantly on you. So you have to manage that cash conversion cycle and the receivable. Right? And within that framework, you have to maintain proper inventory management. That is going to be a part of managing the whole cash conversion cycle. Good. So within the framework of managing the cash conversion cycle, you're talking about inventory, your receivables and your payables. I'd say you want to lengthen the time frame that you actually use to pay your payables, but you have to be very careful with that, guys, right? Because it is that you don't want to become an individual who person say you don't pay on time. You want to maintain good relationship. But if it is that you can move it from say 30 days to 35 days, 35 days may not be such a bad thing, but you don't want to take it to 40 days, right? Good. So, right. Now, the next component, well, it may not apply to a lot of you because we know small businesses do not hold a lot of cash, and you don't have a lot of money to do large-scale investment. But the aim for you is to move from small to big, right? Or it is that will not be operating. Good. So as it is that you transition, this will stick into your head that when it is that your businesses have grown and it is that you have lots of cash resources at your disposal and investment, you want to invest in, interest rates will be going up. Good. Interest rates will be going up. So it is that one, you want to invest in things where it is that you're getting higher interest rates. And two, in terms of on the cost side, because you'll be borrowing as well, right? You want to manage your interest rate risk. So it is that you're not just going to take on fixed rate debt, but you take on a fixed and variable rate debt so as to manage your interest rate risk, right? So yes, it is that I'm running ahead of where you are now, but I want to keep that in mind so that at some point in time, when it is that you reach beyond the SME space, you can recall that there was a gentleman from JMMB by the name of Theodore who said that you want to do these things in order to mitigate the risk of inflation on your cash account and investment accounts when you get to that side. All right. So the next component is, of course, the balance sheet, and right. So naturally, it is that plants and property would increase in value over time, not instantaneously, right? Because in inflationary environment, people don't just go out and buy, but over time the prices increase. Good. So it's a good thing to actually own plants and property. But, please note on the other side that, these do not generate cash flow, right? Unless it is that you're renting them. So you always have to, when it is that you're acquiring asset, this is a takeaway. When you're acquiring assets, you don't just think about what they provide in terms of, inflation hedge, etc. You also have to look at the cash flow component because that's a very important part of business, right? Now, cash loses value in inflation. All right. So if it is that you own a business and you're generating cash, you don't want to hold a lot of cash. Even if it is that it's a 30-day instrument, put it on the 30-day instrument, you're getting a return on it. Right? You want to hold as little cash as possible, right? So you want to develop an appropriate edge. And edging can be through a conduit of an interest-bearing account. And in the case of a country like Jamaica, where it is that you have depreciation of a currency, we are good stewards, and we're not encouraging individuals now to go out and convert their J dollar into US dollars. But that is one means by which it is that you're able, right, to mitigate the risk of inflation on your balance sheet by holding an appropriate edge. Good, by the US dollar, a mix of J dollar and US dollar. Good. As I said, investment decline in value with inflation. So you have to immunize that investment, and you do so with a diversification, by diversifying with a mix of US dollar and Jamaican dollar investment, as well as TT. I'm talking to my TT people, right? And TT dollar. And you want that to be interest-bearing investments which generate a real return. And by real return, you're talking about nominal interest, not depreciation, but rather inflation is positive. Good. So these are the things that you want to do. The financiers would say immunize your balance sheet against inflation. It may not be a full immunization, it may not be fully inoculated against it. However, it does offer you some protection. Good. Now, in concluding, it's a whole lot that we have gone through just now, right? I hope it is that I haven't put you to sleep, but we have seen where it is that inflation has been relatively high in Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica over the period 2017 to 2022. Inflation, average annual inflation for Jamaica is 8.9%. And for the period 2019 to 2022, the annual average inflation is 7%. Good. So, maybe it's early days yet, but, you're seeing some improvement in terms of inflation being 1.9% lower. Probably it's luck, or perhaps it is that the central bank is actually doing a good job in terms of its new inflation mandate. But, kudos, to them if it is that it is so, because you're seeing where it is that, there's a reduction. Now, for Trinidad and Tobago, over the period 2020, that should be 2002, right? 2002, let me just change it. 2002 to 2022, the annual average inflation is 5.2%. Good. So, the current inflation rate up to December, as I pointed out, was 8.7%. Good. So it is that, yes, it's a few percentage points above what it has always been, but the takeaway is that inflation in both economies, right, has been a major sticking point. And as I pointed out, within the normal process of an economy in terms of, growth, people negotiating wages and salaries increase, etc., you will always have inflation. But what is important is that you want inflation to be relatively low and to be predictable, because within that framework, you can actually, make contract. If it is that for whatever reason, I can't, let's say I know that inflation is running at 4%, right? And I'm negotiating wages with my friend Vincent. I can say, okay, Vincent, within a 3-year contract, I want, 5% increase per year. If, however, inflation is erratic and high, right, I don't want to negotiate a 3-year contract with him. I'm going to negotiate a 1-year contract, because it is that I don't want to negotiate a 5% increase and then inflation in year 2 is actually 80%, because it is that I'll be in poverty, and we'll be calling for you guys on the forum to actually help me out, coming with my cup, to asking you to throw not coins, but rather dollars, because of, the high inflation. Okay. Now, another takeaway is that I want you to always look at your customers, your competitor, and your community. Do the research. It is imperative for you to know your customers. When it is, I speak of community, the community is a sort of environment that you're operating in, right? Whether it is that there's a lot of competitor, or it is that, there's room for you to actually increase price because there's not so much. So you need to know the 3 C's, and knowing the 3 C's, it means that, you're able to make better business decision. Of course, you have to continuously work on improving your business fitness. Right? Improving your business fitness, what I'm speaking about is for you to understand, what is happening on the revenue side, what is happening on the expenditure side, for you to have proper profile of all the goods that you're selling, of all your expenditure. You have to know your business inside out. You have to know, even when it is that inflation is low, to trim away the fat. So it is that you operate a mean business so you can generate, better returns. And it is that you are able to grow your business over time so that you'll be calling me to say, hey, Theo, I have, X million dollars and I need to invest, move away from just, my business operation. I need to go into, investing in financial products. So, of course, thank you for, for coping with me as it is that I take you through what would have been a bedtime story and put you to sleep. I hope, however, that you have discerned a lot from what it is that I have just communicated. And of course, we in the research unit at JMMB are always open to queries from the general public. And, we are happy to more than assist, our sister entities, the SME unit with whatever they're doing. So thank you for having me. And it was a great pleasure.
All right. Thanks so
Natalia?
much, Theodore. Yes, thank you very, very much. It was a lot. I mean, it was a good reminder for me as well of some things, right? So thank you very, very much. Before we close and before we let you leave, I would like to ask the participants that are on if they have any questions or if they needed clarity on anything that we just went through. Now would be the time to ask the questions while we have Theo here with us. So feel free to raise your hands, put your questions in the chat, any comments that you have. I see a lot of people leaving positive comments. Somebody wanted to ask a question. I heard somebody unmute. Any questions from anyone?
Yes, I want to ask a question.
Okay, sure.
All right, Mr. Mitchell. You mentioned the possibility, depending on the environment and the market one is operating in. You mentioned the possibility of increasing prices to keep up with inflation. My question to you is that if the markup is pegged to a percentage, as prices increase, your purchasing price you pay for goods and services increase, wouldn't your prices automatically increase because your price to the end user is pegged as a percentage of the price that you purchase your goods and services at? Or would you necessarily need to increase your markup to keep up with inflation? So what I'm getting at is, if prices are increasing continuously and your profitability is a percentage of the price you pay for your goods and services, would inflation still have an impact on your business? Would you also need to increase the volume of sales to keep up with inflation? Or would it be a net, a neutral impact? Would the impact of inflation be neutral if your prices to your consumers is pegged as a percentage of the price that you pay for those goods and services? Or would you need to increase your volumes or increase your markup?
Okay, thank you very much for that, Courtney. And that is a very
Milton.
Milton, sorry.
Yeah.
Right, very good question. Right. I think it is that to an extent you've answered the question, in that if you peg the markup to the goods, right? So if it is that the good is, let's say, $10, so it is that your markup is, say, 40%. Right, so it is that the markup 10% bring it to 40%, bring it to $14, right? So it is that if the price does go up, by virtue of pegging the markup to the price of the good, what you're doing is to immunize yourself against that inflationary effect, right? So the net impact on you in terms of from your gross margin would be static, right? Good. So that is, if it is that you're operating in an environment where you're able to do that, then that is great. You know what I'm saying? Good, because it simply means that you're able to pass on whatever price rise you obtain, a $1 increase, you're able to pass that on to the consumer. It simply means that what you're doing is to preserve your profit, right? So your profit will grow in line with inflation nominally, but in real terms, it will be static. Good. If, however, you want to grow your profit in real terms, then you could perhaps increase the gross margin on the goods. But then I would advise not to do that in a high inflationary environment, because to the extent that if it is that consumers have choices, there are competitors and substituting product, they will substitute away from your product, and you could actually see a decline in sales. Right? So yes, you want to immunize your sales against inflation, and via adding that profit, that gross margin is a good way of doing so, but I would not want you to increase the gross margin necessarily unless it is that you have a market which you capture where you're able to do that.
All right, Mr. Mitchell, can I come in again?
Sure.
Here is how inflation will affect even those businesses that are pegged as a percentage of your price to the consumer. As inflation goes up, wouldn't it not affect your volume of sales? Meaning the consumer will have less disposable income, and so that will affect your sales. And at the same time, you would need to find more money to repurchase goods. So while your sales volume might decrease as inflation go up because the consumer has less income to spend with you, at the same time, you have to find more money to purchase goods because prices are going up. How does one mitigate against all those factors?
All right, good. So it is that so price level is going up on the cost of the goods side. As you indicated, if it is that you're able to maintain the margin, then by virtue of that, essentially you will be maintaining the quote unquote same level of profit. If, however, it is that there's a decline in terms of the quantum of goods and services that individuals are purchasing, then naturally it is that you would have some amount of decline in terms of your overall sales, and of course it is that your gross profit. Good. We can't necessarily control we cannot control person's budget, but what we can control is what it is that we are doing. So it is that we could look at if it is that it's possible to look at new markets to get into, so it is that we can improve volumes, then that is one means, right? But that will take time. That is not instantaneous. What we have under our belt, which we could somewhat control, are some of the costs at our disposal, right? Like the utilities, the transportation, etc. Right? So those are the immediate things which we may be able to tighten, so to speak, in order to to maintain either one, the same level of profitability, or simply the profit falling by a lower margin than if it is that we otherwise did not act.
Okay, but isn't there a direct correlation between inflation and a decrease in your sales volume? Because the consumer, the end user, will have less to spend with you, and so is the natural consequence of inflation that you will do less business?
Well, again, it depends on the type of goods that you utilize classic economic theory and actually practical work. It's going to be dependent on the type of goods that you're selling. You know, I mean, on the macro scale, yes, you would have some goods where it is that there's actually decline in terms of the volume, but there are other goods where it is that they are somewhat, you know, they are somewhat, they are needed so much that it is that individual will substitute away from other goods and purchase those goods. That's why it is that I stress that you have to, one, do your research, know your market, know your customers, know the clientele that you know, you're selling to, because this will inform the action that you take, right? I am not taking away the fact that that is not a distinct possibility, but depending on the market that you're operating in, those who you're selling to, and you know, what is happening with respect to inflation, because I mean, inflation could be just you know, a temporary spike. Let's say the Jamaican environment, or even in Trinidad, you will have a situation where there's a drought, good, and because of the component of the consumption basket, are you know, higher heavy rainfalls, the CPI actually increase, you know, spike up, you know, significantly. But as night follow days, as production return to a level of normality, inflation will fall, right? So if consumers form view with respect to the expectation of inflation, if they expect inflation to actually decline, right, good, and you know, to a relatively low level, they may not decline or reduce the quantum of goods and services that they are purchasing. So everything has to be taken within context. And not only that, as I will stress, that you have to know the market that you're operating in, and you have to know your customers, right? And that will help you to discern what you do when it is that you're faced with, you know, relatively high inflation.
Latoya has her hand up.
Yes. Latoya, you can go ahead.
Okay, good night, everybody. Good night to the family at large, especially to Mr. Ald. In regards to what, I'm not sure if I remember his name, but the gentleman before Mr. Mitchell just spoke. I think as an entrepreneur, you have to know how to be steady in the storm. So, for example, you recognize that the inflation is so high that you will need to touch on your profit, your money that you would use to pay yourself, to put back into the business to keep yourself afloat, because tax going up lasts only but for so long. So in order to win, sometimes you have to lose. So if you believe in your business, I think you could capitalize on putting back what you usually use for your leisure or to deal with your business in exemption of your business itself. If it means that you have to put that fund back in for that time to keep the business afloat and keep your customers satisfied until you get that fall where you can pick up back from where you left, or even gain more from your loss, then I think that could be a thought. I'm not sure, I could be wrong. But sometimes you just have to learn to be steady in the storm. And you usually have 6 Aki, now you can only have 4. It's just for a time.
That's a very good point, Latoya, and I would like to add to that you know, within the frame of things, there's something called the business cycle. Good, and the business cycle speaks to a phenomenon where it is that you know, there are times when it is that the economy is performing at such a level where it's quote you know, demand is outstripping supply, and therefore what you're seeing is an increase in inflation and central banks get in the mix in terms of raising interest rates. You know, I spoke a lot about that with a view of bringing down aggregate demand so as to get inflation to a level of control. Now, within that context, it's going to be a storm, as you spoke, you know, you rightfully say. So businesses need to navigate those headwinds, the higher interest rate, the higher inflation. You know, how long the business cycle, that part of the business cycle lasts. You know, in classical theory, they'll say with 1 year to 18 months. Good. So it is that if we're able to outlive this relatively high inflationary period, then there's come a time where it is that central banks will have to cut rates, because it is that the economy, will be in free fall, lower demand for goods, low aggregate demand, growth will slow. So you will see the Bank of Jamaica cutting rates, and that will help to lift your business, because under that condition, where it is that the economy, there's lower growth, relatively low aggregate demand. We expect inflation to fall. We expect lower interest rates, and that will provide the sort of environment where you are able to thrive again in preparation of another time period when it is that there's high inflation and the central bank undo its policy by means of raising interest rates.
Yes, sir. You could just become a surfer, ride the waves.
Pretty much so.
All right,
Nicholas?
thanks for the
Yes,
yes.
You're welcome.
Go
yes,
ahead,
just
Nicholas.
okay. Thank you very much. Very good presentation. I appreciate you guys putting this together, and then it took some planning and time. The two suggestions, two comments. Is that to piggyback what you said a while ago. What you can do also is to hedge against the interest rate, or the FS rate rather, by saying if the FS rate from Jamaican to US, let's say, is 150 to 1, you could set a price for 155 to 1. And once the cost of goods sold, etc., that within that particular range, you don't have to move the price so often. So once it is above 5%, the rate, FX rate, you can say, okay, fine, if it's 3%, I could cool off a little bit more. If it's 4 or 4.5% close to your bottom line, then that time you can move it. Another thing I heard was very good as well was the fact that you can increase your credit terms with your suppliers, and also shorten your customer, your payables as well. So you negotiate, 15 days credit, can get 30 days. Okay, fine, good. Customers, they have to pay now in 7 days instead of 14. So that switch of dynamics now will help you not to have so much demand on cash on your business. You're paying out as fast as getting the money in. That will help you to stabilize the cash flow, and in turn, as I say, ride the waves.
I concur, Nicholas.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicholas. I see Latoya has her hand up again. Latoya.
Okay, yes, thank you. Just a quick question, or food for thought idea. What about starting savings that you would just name that inflation? So throughout this season, you would go back for that account that like a piggy bank
I
where
would
you
do that.
snatch away for
I would do
high
that.
inflation.
Let me tell you why. Like you said, inflation basically eats money. It's like cancer to money. So maybe what you could do is to take that excess money that you have and buy, let's say, a machine or like a truck or a bus to turn
Yeah, that's what
over,
I mean.
or a better return that could, at
That's what
least.
I mean. But you would keep that saving until within that time. So whenever the inflation is up and you recognize that, well, your back is against the wall and you need this machine, or what, for example, what you just posed, you would have that money to use to purchase whatever it is that you need to purchase. It's just a thought, though, or just a question if it's a wise idea.
All right. So as I recall it is, as we go back to the point, if it is that you're in the business of making money, a return on your asset, right? 1, 2, you want any investment that you're doing, you want it to outpace inflation. Good. You want it to outpace inflation. If it is that there is something that is called in finance, it's actually a cognitive bias, where it is that individuals maintain what is known as mental accounting, where you have you put aside savings for different things. So you may have a situation where you have one saving account, it is it's being eaten away in terms of the return may be lower than inflation, etc. But you're saying, oh, I'm putting it up for a rainy day, so it is that I'm keeping it. But you're not recognizing that by keeping it, you're not generating a real positive return on it. Good. So if it's a case where it is that it's not affecting the general cash flow of your business, right, in that you have sufficient cash at your disposal to meet your obligations, so you have excess cash, one, two, and two, if it is that you're putting it in an investment vehicle which is able to outstrip inflation, right, then by all means you can do that. If, however, it is that you don't have that saving will impact your ability to meet obligation in the business, or it is that the return generated is very low, I would not suggest that you go that road. So you have to take into consideration the sort of return and business environment you are operating in, and your own personal happenings to discern whether or not it is that you go down that road, right? So it is not to say yes or nay, but it is wholly dependent on the circumstances of the business.
Understand, thanks.
You're welcome.
Great. Thanks very much for those questions and those comments, guys. Anybody else has any last questions or comments before we close off? No, I'm not seeing any hands raised. I'm not seeing anything in the chat. All right, so if anyone does perchance have any questions, you have any aha moments, and you just want to run it by us, you could feel free to send us an email. Our email address is in the chat, I believe. It's SMEresourcecenter@jmmb.com. I think Denise is putting it again for us. And yes, we would be more than happy to pass any questions or concerns you have over to Theo for his feedback, and get you those answers. For those of you who are asking, yes, the presentation will be available following the session, so we'll be sure to send that out to you. Yes, and feel free to reach out to us if you are interested in becoming part of the SME Resource Center family. We do these workshops monthly. If you become a part of the Resource Center, you have access to a whole lot of things and a whole lot of support to help you grow and scale your businesses. So, feel free to reach out to us. Again, our email is in the chat. It's SMEresourcecenter@jmmb.com. We would love to hear from you guys and love to have you all join the family. So with that being said, thank you very much, Theo, for taking the time to join us this evening. And thank you to all the participants for staying on and being so engaging. And stay tuned for our next workshop next month. Take care, everybody. Good night.
Bye, gentle folks.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.
Good night. Good night. Good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you, guys.
Good night. Good night.
So Miss Tani, should I send you my account number now? All right, guys, it was nice having you. It was nice chatting with your team.
Exceptional presentation, Theo.
All right, thank you very much, Vincent. And that's not just being Fortis, right?
No, not being Fortis at all.
All right, thanks so much. Of course, it is that I'll be happy and to help you guys with any of these sessions once it is that I have the time. myself or Jermaine. All right, so I'm about to do daddy duties now. So all the
Okay.
best. Take care.
Yeah, man. Take
Bye-bye.
care.
You take care.